What if one of Hollywood's most flawless icons, the man everyone called perfect, carried a secret so dangerous that he could never share it while alive? Paul Newman, the golden husband, the movie legend, the philanthropist who gave away hundreds of millions, looked untouchable. To the public, he was the dream every man envied and every woman adored. A 50-year marriage to Joanne Woodward, a reputation so clean it seemed almost impossible, and a career that delivered some of the most unforgettable films of the 20th century. But behind the mask of perfection, whispers told a different story. They spoke of letters hidden in drawers, tape recordings never meant to be heard, names carefully guarded until Newman's very last days, rumors of affairs that would have destroyed his reputation in an instant. A secret list that, if true, reveals a side of Newman the world was never supposed to see. And tonight, we're going to follow that list, one by one, name by name, from Hollywood's most magnetic seducers, to rivals who turned intimacy into betrayal, to gentle souls lost too soon. Because if Paul Newman was perfection on the outside, what lived inside was far more complicated and far more human. The illusion of perfection. In the 1950s and 60s, Hollywood built Paul Newman as the rarest kind of star. Handsome, charming, respected by critics, adored by audiences, and scandal-free. While others drank, brawled, or crumbled under the weight of fame, Newman seemed untouchable. Married to Joanne Woodward since 1958, his relationship was celebrated as one of Hollywood's very few unbreakable love stories. By the 1970s, he had become more than a star. He was a philanthropist who built an empire of food products just so he could donate the profits, over $500 million in his lifetime, to charity. He was a devoted father, a race car driver, a man who looked like he had it all. But perfection, especially in Hollywood, is the most dangerous illusion of all. And whispers said that behind the blue eyes and charming smile, Newman carried secrets so carefully hidden that even those closest to him only caught glimpses. Marlon Brando, the seducer. The first name whispered in connection with Newman's hidden life was Marlon Brando. By the early 1960s, Brando was already Hollywood's most magnetic and dangerous figure. Known for his brilliance on screen and chaos off of it, Brando thrived on scandal. The story goes that Newman and Brando first truly crossed paths in 1961 at a glittering Beverly Hills gala. Newman, polished and careful as always, stood beside Joanne Woodward. Brando arrived late, shirt wrinkled, collar open, eyes flashing between mischief and menace. He didn't just notice Newman, he studied him. At one point, Brando leaned close and said, "I thought you'd be as boring as the papers make you. Turns out you're the only one here who isn't pretending." For a man like Newman, disciplined, allergic to flattery, those words hit differently, and he didn't push them away. Soon their meetings moved beyond public events. Coffee in quiet Westwood cafes where waiters pretended not to notice. Walks around Silver Lake, reflections moving together across the water. Secret escapes to Palm Springs, hidden behind heavy curtains. For Newman, it felt like love raw, undeniable, impossible to resist. But Brando didn't love the way others did. Desire to him was another performance, another mask. He introduced Newman to rooms full of strangers, producers, journalists, men who promised power. Newman thought they were gatherings of friends. In time, he realized he was being used, paraded like a prize in Brando's endless pursuit of attention. And then came the betrayal. Handwritten letters from Newman, tender and vulnerable, somehow ended up in the hands of gossip reporters. A column appeared, "Love Behind the Lens." No names were mentioned, but everyone knew. Some swore Brando himself leaked the letters, feeding on the scandal. Others claimed he read them aloud at smoky, late-night parties, laughing as Newman's words became entertainment. Joanne discovered one of those letters herself, tucked into a book. She didn't scream or storm out. Instead, She left a quiet note for her husband. "If you need refuge, I'm here. If you need another lie, I can't help you." Newman kept that note folded away for years. Brando had lit a fire, then walked away, leaving Newman scarred. But Brando wasn't the only shadow in Newman's life. Steve McQueen, the rival. If Brando was seduction and betrayal, Steve McQueen was fire and fury. The rivalry between Newman and McQueen is Hollywood legend. On screen, they were often cast as equals, two blue-eyed icons battling for dominance. But whispers suggest their rivalry was fueled by something far more personal. It began, some say, in the late 1960s, at an awards night where McQueen's raw energy clashed with Newman's polished charm. McQueen's stare that evening was impossible to ignore, defiant, hungry, almost possessive. Soon, behind closed doors, encounters turned into something more dangerous. Dim hotel rooms, shouting matches that ended in silence, staff whispering about broken glass, and slammed doors. To Newman, it was intoxicating and terrifying. To McQueen, it was never love, it was control. He wanted to own Newman, to prove that even Hollywood's golden husband could be bent and broken. Rumors spread of cassette tapes McQueen kept hidden, arguments recorded, confessions preserved, each one a weapon waiting to be used. Some swore he had a box filled with them under his bed. In interviews, McQueen mocked Newman without ever naming him. Asked about an obsessed admirer, McQueen smirked, "I don't remember his name. Probably some creepy fan." The humiliation cut deep. Their tension spilled onto sets. To the world, it looked like two stars competing, but beneath it was something personal, raw, and merciless. Newman once spit out 2 words about McQueen, "that bastard." Not casual words, but words soaked in decades of rage. If Brando turned Newman into a prop, McQueen turned him into prey. Robert Redford, the silent betrayal. With Brando and McQueen, Newman faced storms of scandal and fire. But with Robert Redford, the wound was quieter and perhaps even deeper. On screen, Newman and Redford were the perfect duo. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, the Sting. Their chemistry was legendary, effortless, the kind of magic no studio could manufacture. Audiences saw brotherhood. But behind the curtain, whispers suggested something else. Crew members spoke of late-night meetings, secret motel visits, canyon walks that ended at sunrise. A driver claimed he dropped them off at opposite ends of a trail, only to see them return together hours later. Their closeness was undeniable. For Newman, it was love. Fragile, dangerous, but real. In a tape rumored to exist, he admitted, "I waited for the day he would love me in the light as he did in the shadows." But Redford was careful, always careful. He cultivated his image as the all-American hero, the family man. When whispers began to leak, Newman considered speaking out. But before he could, vicious rumors began circulating about him, stories painting him as unstable, erratic, dangerous. No names, but the implication was clear. His career slowed, invitations dried up. And through it all, Redford remained silent. He never defended Newman. He never acknowledged what they shared. At award shows, when asked about Newman, Redford would smile politely, then change the subject. For Newman, that silence was betrayal. Betrayal not with knives or shouting, but with a smile on stage and cold distance off of it. James Dean, the flame that burned too fast. If Redford's betrayal came in silence, James Dean's story was marked by tragedy. Dean and Newman were often painted as rivals, two versions of the same rising star. But when they met, rivalry melted into recognition. Newman polished and steady, Dean reckless and raw. Their connection was instant. They shared hidden moments, midnight diners, long drives down deserted highways in Dean's Porsche, borrowed cabins where scripts turned into whispered confessions. Dean once told Newman after a storm-soaked premiere, "I don't need anyone to understand me. I just need you not to pretend." Newman didn't reply. He simply pressed Dean's hand to his chest, where his heartbeat betrayed everything unsaid. But Hollywood noticed. A blind item appeared, hinting at two young rebels sharing more than lines. Suddenly, Newman's calls slowed. Invitations disappeared. Then came the threats. An envelope with a warning scrawled inside. Careful. Stars burn out fastest in the dark. Dean unraveled. His calls to Newman became desperate. His silences darker. Newman once drove across town at 3 a.m, pounding on Dean's door until his knuckles bled. No answer. Only a scrap of paper slid beneath the door. If loving you is wrong, then I don't deserve to live. Days later, the crash ended it all. Dean, just 24, gone in an instant. Newman carried the guilt forever. Friends said he kept a shard of glass from the wreck, hidden in a drawer. In one whispered recording, Newman asked, "Why didn't I get on that plane? If I had gone, would he still be alive?" Dean became the love Newman could never save. Sal Mineo, the gentle escape. The next name wasn't a superstar. Sal Mineo was a rising star of the 1950s, once called the next James Dean, but Hollywood had chewed him up and spit him out. Too soft, too unwilling to hide. He was branded a liability. Newman met him not at a glamorous party but in a therapist's office in West Hollywood. Joanne, ever patient, had pushed Paul toward counseling, and there, across the waiting room, was Sal. Their bond wasn't scandalous or explosive. It was gentle. Notes slipped into Newman's pocket. "If they call you broken, let me be broken with you." A cassette left at his door. A piano melody recorded at home. Dreams of Venice, of a film about two men in a drowning city clinging to each other. For the first time in years, Newman imagined a life without masks. But Hollywood doesn't let men like Sal dream for long. In February 1976, Mineo was stabbed in an alley outside his home, officially called a robbery, unofficially whispered as punishment. Newman was shattered. Joanne once found a handkerchief with Sal's initials folded in his drawer. In his final tapes, Newman admitted, "He showed me that love didn't have to be cruel. And I never got to thank him." Montgomery Clift, the wounded mirror. The last name was Montgomery Clift. By the time Newman and Clift grew close, both were already scarred. Clift had been disfigured in a car crash, drowning in pills and isolation. Newman, by then, was a master at wearing a mask. Their bond grew through letters, not love letters, but survival notes. Confessions scratched in shaky blue ink. One read, "I don't need you to choose me. I just need you not to pretend I don't exist." When one of those letters vanished, the gossip columns sharpened their knives. Joanne discovered the truth herself when she found an opened envelope under her pillow. She left only one line for Paul: "If you choose lies, don't ask me to live inside them." Clift spiraled further. Newman promised he would stop hiding, but before he could, Clift cut him off completely. The silence lasted until Clift's death in 1966. Newman was left broken, carrying fragments of love stories that never had endings. The cost of silence. 6 names, 6 secrets, 6 shadows Newman carried until his final days. Some stories were storms of betrayal, some were fires of obsession, some were tender sorrows too fragile for daylight. But together, they formed a hidden story of a man the world thought was flawless. Hollywood in the Golden Age was a machine of illusions. Studios controlled not just careers, but lives. Publicists sculpted stories, magazines printed lies. And above it all, one unspoken rule reigned: men could not love men. So Newman, like so many others, carried his truth in silence. He smiled for cameras. He played perfect roles. He lived a perfect marriage. And behind it all, he bled quietly. Perhaps that is why the legend of his hidden tapes endures, because they remind us that even the brightest stars cast shadows. And sometimes it is the shadows that tell us who they really were. Paul Newman, will forever be remembered as a legend. His films, his charities, his love story with Joanne. But perhaps his most haunting legacy is this: perfection is an illusion. What endures are the struggles we hide. And maybe, just maybe, the whispers of his hidden list are not only about him, they are about Hollywood itself, an era built on silence, fear, and forbidden longing. Because even legends are human. They bleed, they break, they long for things they can never have. And sometimes, the most unforgettable stories are the ones never meant to be told.